Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm so pleased to be joined by Tim and Trevor White, the Oscar-nominated producers of King Richard, which has 6 Oscar nominations this year, including Best Picture. Congratulations, Tim and Trevor, on those nominations. And the movie was pretty warmly embraced by the Academy and stuff. I'd imagine like that has to be really encouraging. But I mean, what was it like for you guys to get, Oscar nomination morning? How'd you find out? And like, just talk a little about that experience, because I think obviously kind of a once in a lifetime thing, or maybe hopefully more in your case, but first time nominees and stuff. So what was that like for you to find out about the?
Well, I can say now, it's funny. I didn't expect it to be nearly as nerve-wracking as it actually was that morning. Honestly, I barely slept the night before. I didn't expect that. And then you just kind of wake up in the morning and you watch the show. And when it actually happens, it's a pretty overwhelming feeling. And that's definitely how I felt. And it was great for the movie, but also just, I think very great to see the rest of the nominations as well. So it was exciting.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you. It is. I mean, I treat it like this is something that, we'll have with us forever. And I think it's, I grew up watching the Oscars. I don't think there's ever been an Oscars I haven't watched. And it was something I remember sitting around with my parents, and it was like an event that we did as a family. And so to now be a part of it in such a meaningful way is, it's just super special. And yeah, like Tim, very nerve-wracking morning, but I think it was exciting because I think we knew the categories we were potentially competitive in, and they just started saying them, and it was really celebratory for Aunjanue and Pam Martin and Zach Balan, and we knew King Richard was having a good day as we got to pictures, so that was exciting.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I was someone who's been watching it. I was like, oh, Pamela Martin's nomination was really exciting, and same with Zach as well. So that was really cool.
The Pam Martin one,
yeah.
When that one happened, I think we were both, because she did such an really amazing job on this film, and it's not someone that I think everyone talks about all the time. And I think when we saw that nomination happen, it was really exciting.
Right. So we're here talking about King Richard, obviously, a story of Richard Williams. I think certainly for me, I knew of Richard Williams, and I knew like the public facing persona of him from the 90s, like a, brash kind of, maybe seemingly arrogant, or how he was portrayed in the media, let's say, not always the most positive terms, but obviously he has this whole other side to him. And I guess the film explores that so wonderfully. For you guys, like, why Richard Williams, and how did you figure that his story would be a compelling way to not just talk about Venus and Serena's rise, but also like his own story? Because I think he's obviously such an incredible character, to build a film on. And I guess, when did you guys realize that would be the case?
Well, so I guess it's really, two things, basically. I think for sort of us and our company, one of the things that we always look for are true stories about real people with an angle into it that is maybe not known or not as well known. So that was kind of sort of a formula that we have really, and that I think we look for. So that was, the first thing, basically. And then for this story, I think specifically, I grew up playing junior tennis. So I was kind of around the circuit, and I remember being maybe 12 or 13 years old. They're a couple of years older than me. And I remember when Venus turned pro, and then Serena turned pro shortly afterwards. And at that point, everyone was talking about Richard, and he was this sort of controversial guy who was holding up signs during the matches, and he was giving all these crazy interviews, I think, to the press, and everyone sort of had a different take on him. And I still remember the image of him at the Lipton, I think in 98 or 99 in Miami, where he was holding up the sign that said, "Told you so." So it was just an image that I think always stuck with me, and I talked about it with Trevor too. And then around maybe 2015 or so, 2014, we started talking about Richard Williams as a character who had this amazing American dream story, who had this vision, and who wrote this plan, and pretty much everything he predicted came true. And it fit into the model that I talked about earlier, which was, for true stories about characters that people know, like Venus and Serena, but an angle into it that they don't know. I think we didn't know sort of everything about Richard's past, and we didn't know really how great the character of Oracene Price was. But these were things that were really discovered along the way, but by Zach Baylin and then Aunjanue, and but that was the initial sort of idea of the movie.
So then from there, how do you get, like, I guess you're going to tell a true story, and obviously I know you ended up, I think you spoke to seemingly a few people before you landed on Zach. How do you get, like, do you decide, like, how do you decide whether you're going to, or how you're going to include the family? You know what I mean? Like, how does that initial process go? Are you going to just, because you don't necessarily need the family buy-in, but obviously you end up with the family buy-in, which is a big key to the movie, I think, as well. Had that whole, like, those early stages go when you guys were, like, kind of, figuring this out?
Yeah, we really felt like at that stage, when we were coming out of having the script in our hand, the best way to kind of make it onto the radar of the Williams sisters was to have something a little bit more than just, a script that didn't really have, it wasn't on the blacklist yet. It didn't have that kind of built-in buzz. And even if it did, I don't know if that would have been the game changer for them. So our calculation was, the script is so good. It might be the best script we ever develop in our entire careers. And so let's go ahead and see if we can put a movie star on it. And Will Smith was always the dream. And so, we took it in to Will, and shortly thereafter, we were in a room with him, and he said he wanted to do it. The caveat being if the Williams family said yes. So that's what we ultimately approached the Williams family with, saying, here's the script. Will Smith wants to do it. And so I think we got on their radar.
Right.
Yeah. We had sent an email
to
Venus. We sent an email to Venus in 2014, just kind of a completely cold email through her assistant, just basically saying, hi, we want to tell your story, and
that, by the way, that sums up me and Tim in like the early stages of our company, where we just had total blind naivete. We didn't know anything, and we just went for stuff. But sometimes
we sent that email, and obviously we got no response, of course. And I think at that point is really when the plan that Trevor just outlined kicked into gear, which was, okay, like, there's no way we can get them really on board with this project now. The only way to make this actually work is to go out and hire a writer and develop a script that is just basically completely undeniable, that goes around town, that everyone talks about, and that you just can't ignore because it's that good. And fortunately, we sort of gave Zach Baylin this charge, and it was an impossible task to actually accomplish. Impossible. I mean, and he achieved it. I mean, he wrote a script that did everything it needed to do in order to get people to pay attention to it. So
yeah, I mean, we were talking before we started recording. I've been fortunate enough to interview a lot of people involved with the film, including Zach, and everyone to a person has talked about how incredible that script is. Obviously, like you mentioned, it was on the blacklist. It's an Oscar-nominated script for Best Original Screenplay. I think when I interviewed Pamela Martin, she was like, it's like the best script she had read in a long time. And Pamela Martin obviously has worked on like Little Miss Sunshine and The Fighter and all these major movies. So it's like, and obviously Will responded to it as well. Zach is a first-time screenwriter. I think he had said you guys were meeting about another project when you kind of pitched his on him. What would, like, how did, I just think that alchemy is so incredible. And like, how did it's just like lightning in a bottle. Like, what made you think that he'd be good for this and able to like, synthesize what you were looking for?
Yeah, well, we didn't. I think what actually happened was we were meeting with him, and at the end of the meeting, he basically said, what are you up to tonight? Just out of like small talk. And at that point, he said he was going to the US Open that night. And we said, oh, you like tennis? Like, sit back down and let us tell you this one other thing we're working on. And at that point, we just had this idea for Richard Williams and for the family, but that was it. And we had met with, 20, 25 writers maybe over the past 2-3 years. And these writers had pitched every version of this movie, everything from it starts in 1975 and it ends in 2015 to the whole movie is a road trip in the car from Compton to Rick Macy Academy. And that's the whole movie. It was over a couple of days. So we had heard every version of this. We didn't exactly know ourselves what the movie was, the timeline was, the window was. We told Zach the story. We told him about Richard. I think he knew a little bit, but he was so visibly moved by the character and the story. And he said, give me a day or two and I'm going to send you an email. And sure enough, 2 days later, he sent us an email that is one of the most amazing things we've both ever read. And to this date, that email is that movie. I mean, it is, he had the window, he had the starting point, the end point, and he had the characters, and he understood Richard in a way that was just so moving. And I think he came to understand Aunjanue, or he came to understand Oracene through the process even more, just because things about her were not available.
To come back to that email, I don't think it's, in retrospect, especially now, I think we'll always look back on that email as such a pivotal thing in all of our lives. I mean, it really was this thing that just felt magical. It felt like, could it be so clean and clear what this movie is? And we actually recently reread that email, and it is shockingly what the movie is. I mean,
it's shocking. You never see that,
Awesome. With very little variance. Like, that email from 2017 or whenever that was is the movie that you see up on screen. It's pretty cool.
That's amazing. Trevor, you before were mentioning obviously like getting Will involved and stuff. Obviously, he's a producer on it as well, an Oscar nominee on that front, and obviously for his acting. We're talking the Monday after the SAG Awards, where he won Best Actor on Sunday night. His speech was great, and I got the sense just like he has such a warmth for everybody involved in the production, it seems. And I guess like obviously when you have a massive star like that at the top of the call sheet, like setting the tone, that's got to be incredible for the cast and stuff. And you guys, can you talk a little about like working with him as a producer and like how important that your relationship with him was to get, like you said, like get basically turn that email into what we're seeing here on screen? And like, I'd love to hear about that.
Tim, do you want to take it, or I can start?
You go for it. Yeah.
I mean, Will, I think there's, you never know what kind of partnership you're going to enter into when you're joining forces with a movie star. And I think what always surprised Tim and me was just how dedicated Will became to this project. I mean, he put so much thought into really the entirety of the script and that creative process. And there's so many facets to this question about what it's like to kind of, from a tone setting standpoint, which, I can't imagine anyone setting a more enjoyable tone on set. I mean, there isn't a person on that movie who doesn't want to do everything in their power to make the best movie possible, given how enjoyable and loving and caring and fun that environment is. I mean, really, I know you're going to hear it time and time again and probably have that. This was like a real family on set. And so much of that is due to Will and also to Ray, our director, who kind of equally provided that environment for everyone to exist in. And so there was nothing but love, like through and through on this movie. And so, you know, so much kudos to Will. I mean, he was such a good partner in that aspect.
I think the one thing I'll say about Will as a producer, you know, I think Trevor's exactly right. As an actor, his level of dedication to the part was just, it was amazing. You know, he really became this character. But I think as a producer, he was so key and essential because he never lost sight of the key sort of macro elements that were so important for this movie. And I think when you're making a movie, especially during COVID, and you have all these variables to worry about, and now all these new variables with the pandemic, testing, all this stuff, it's easy to get sucked into all these other issues and to lose focus on the core things. And Will was, I think, very much our North Star on this movie in terms of not losing sight really ever of the key family, the key sort of heart of this movie, and dwelling on it. And it was key.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the pandemic, because when I first saw this, I was like, oh, this must have been shot before the pandemic, and then it was waiting to get released. And then as I found out, obviously there was a big break from the pandemic because of what happened. But I think, again, that's maybe a testament or a confirmation of what you're saying, is that as an audience, you can't really even tell, I think, that there was an interruption or any kind of obviously all these added things to the production that would make it more difficult with the pandemic. So I think, again, that's it speaks to what you're saying there certainly about how, Will and you guys as well probably were able to keep that, keep the tone
we
up.
shot the majority of the movie.
Yeah.
It was, we had 18 days on a 50-day shoot in the can. And so, there was 5 months, or really we went down in March and we weren't back up shooting till October. So there was a long stretch in between of just figuring out how to come back into this world safely and do it in a way where we weren't hindering the creative.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and you can't even tell. I mean, I'm telling you, you can't. So that's great. Yeah, that's really great. Trevor, you mentioned Ray Green, Ronaldo Marcus Green, the director. This is he had an acclaimed film at Sundance, Monsters and Men. I know he did Joe Bell, which came out, I think, maybe after a little. I forget how the timeline of that was, but obviously, I think he got this job maybe before that came out. Obviously, I guess, what was it about Ray that you guys and Will really warmed to? Because obviously, this is the biggest project he had made to that point in his career, and I think he's an incredibly good fit for the material. Obviously, because I know his background is also in sports, but I just I guess what were you guys thoughts on him, and how again, what was it like to decide on him for this project?
Yeah. It's funny because we ended up meeting with so many different filmmakers with this movie. I mean, one of the advantages of having a script that's really loved around town is a lot of people wanted to meet on it. And so for us, we were able to kind of have a foundation of hearing a lot of different perspectives on how to approach the material. And I think with Ray, it was one of those, I mean, Tim met with him first. And I remember the phone call that you had afterward, which was, you need to meet with him ASAP because I think we might have just found our guy. Yeah. And it was just this kind of gut feeling. And I had it in my first meeting with him where it wasn't just his background. It wasn't just the way he talked about the movie or the family aspect, which of course, all those ingredients really excited us. And it wasn't even just the way he talked about shooting the movie, which was super exciting. It was just a core kind of understanding of the movie, which was exactly in line with the way that we had spent years developing it. And I think for us, there was just a synergy that we just felt intrinsically. And so I think that was kind of what guided us into moving Ray into meet with Will in the studio. And you know, he had a lot of people he had to impress to get the job. So
He did it. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was really two things. It was that sort of came out of that initial conversation. The first was, you know, he talked about the script, and Ray loved the script just like everyone else. And he said, though, I want the family to be a bigger part. And Ray was the only person who we met with who said that. And it was different from everyone else. And ultimately, when Ray got the job, Zach went in and sort of added the family elements a little more. And I think that's something that everyone talks about when they see this movie, is just how great the family is. So that was something that was unique to Ray, in that, you know,
example,
I think a lot of people, sorry.
All 5 girls on the court practicing, that was true. And we didn't have it in the initial draft. All 5 girls stuffed into that van. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that Ray really brought into it.
Exactly. And I think, like a lot of other filmmakers, I think their initial instinct was like, you know, stream it down a little bit, like streamline it. It's too complicated if you have all these people. It's easier if it's really a story about Richard and the 2 girls. And I think Ray had the opposite point of view. He said that that's not what this is. This is about the family. And I think once Ray came on, Zach did an unbelievable job of kind of incorporating some of that, working with the family to figure it out. And so there was that. And then the second thing was really with the tennis. And as sort of an avid tennis player myself, it was very important to me that the tennis look a certain way. And I felt sort of a real obligation to the tennis world, that, you know, that it look real. And, you know, one of the things Ray said right away was basically, I don't want to shoot this like a Nike commercial. I don't want to have slow motion and crazy camera shots and a lot of this, like, and a lot of these tricks that people do in sports movies, tennis movies. He said, this is going to be very natural. It's going to be completely authentic. We're going to let the action play out, but it's not going to actually be about the tennis. It's going to be all about the emotion that's happening on the court. And there was just something about the way he talked about it and the way he understood sports. And I think the confidence that he really had when talking about it, that, like Trevor said, it was a gut feeling, but that gut feeling came from those things.
Yeah. It definitely works. Like, I think the tennis scenes are amazing. And like you said, all the stuff we're saying here is like part of the reason I think the movie is so successful, which I guess we have to wrap up here. And thank you guys so much for your time. But I want to ask you, like, I mean, obviously we're in a different world now. Like, pandemic has affected everything. I think maybe if this was 10, 15 years ago, this movie is like more of a, you know, makes a different amount of money at the box office, let's say. But obviously it's got 6 Oscar nominations, Best Picture nomination. You guys are nominated. The Producers Guild. Will just won at the SAG Awards. This is an incredibly successful film, I guess, with different metrics now than maybe we had for our definitions of success 5-10 years ago. For you guys as producers, I mean, how do you measure like the success of this film? And do you feel like, you know, I guess how did that all play out for you watching, you know, the journey of this film unfold from festivals in the fall to like where we are now?
Well,
It's different. I'm sorry. Go, Trevor.
yeah, no, good. Tim, you start.
I was going to say, I think you're exactly right. It's different now. But I think the HBO Max day and date with theatrical was actually very helpful for the movie, because it got a lot of people to see the movie that wouldn't have seen it necessarily. So I think that was the right thing. And I think you're exactly right. The metrics for a successful movie, especially one like ours, a drama, are changing and I think evolving. I think they'll continue to, but I think the key for us is just feeling like the movie is having a cultural impact, like it's a cultural event. And we feel like the release in conjunction with a lot of the awards talk now and what's happening now with the movie is really helping to achieve that measure of success.
Yeah, and I think the pandemic just changed so much on everyone's minds that the things that were important weren't important anymore in the same regard. You know, I think when we first went into making this movie and deciding to partner with Warner Brothers, we did it in large part because we wanted that traditional true theatrical. You know, we didn't know how many opportunities we were going to have that true theatrical. And so once we realized that audiences weren't really coming back to theaters, I mean, Spider-Man aside and event movies where you're going to get tons of young people who feel comfortable going to movie theaters out, we just were, as Tim said, excited that as many people would have access to the movie as possible. And I think and what was great about the day and date was it wasn't just streaming, you know, people who were comfortable in movie theaters, who were excited for the experience still got to have it. So, you know, I think, yes, we can't like qualify the movie in a traditional sense as a success theatrically like we would have 2 or 3 years ago. But I think that matters less. I think what matters far more for us is how audiences react. And you talked about kind of the initial days in the festivals. I mean, I don't know if you were at Telluride or not, but that initial Telluride screening was incredible. You know, there was so much love coming out of that night. And it was the first time we got to see it with a real audience outside of some test screenings. And so that was kind of the start of the ride, and it just continued every time we watched it with people, that audiences were just really responding to it. And so that's really the most kind of gratifying aspect of all of this.
Yeah, I would say I was at that screening at Telluride, and I remember going into Telluride, it was an unknown, let's say. It was like, oh, I know Will Smith's playing Richard Williams. Didn't know that much about it. And I remember just sitting there being like, this is good. Like the whole time, I mean, like, this is good. And like people were really into it. And I think you've seen that over and over again, the response to the film. Like sometimes the films it's a very good movie. And like, you know, the power of the movie is that people watch it and they're going to say it's good, you know? And I think that's a good thing when you have a solid movie out there.
I think that was such a common thing I heard that night, which was like, I didn't really know what to expect going in, or I wasn't that interested. And like, I loved it, you know? Yes. And I think that's always such a great feeling to get.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, it is like a crowd pleaser, whatever that means right now. But Tim and Trevor White, we have to wrap up here. Oscar-nominated producers of King Richard, which is a 6th-time Oscar nominee this year, including Best Picture. Thank you both so much for speaking about the film. It was great talking with you.